everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Visions TV. I'm your host, Karen Dahlman, and today I have a really special guest, somebody I've known in this industry for quite some time. He's well respected. He's probably one of the #1 podcasters out there and one of the original podcasters in the paranormal field. Welcome to the show, Jim Harold. Welcome.
Hey, so good to be here, Karen. And I think you're absolutely kind of the best at what you do. So it's an honor to be on your show and talk about Ouija and spooky stuff. And I really appreciate the invitation very much.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. And you guys, I want you to learn all about Jim if you don't know him. But let's start by asking Jim, what is it that you do besides what I just shared?
That I'm a full-time podcaster. I've been podcasting on the paranormal since 2005. It was so early that my first podcast series, which is still going, was entitled The Paranormal Podcast. It was that early that I could get that name. And did that several years kind of as a hobby, started to get more serious as time went on. And back in 2012, almost 11 years now, I started full time. And I do a number of podcasts. My two main podcasts to be of interest to your audience are Jim Harold's Campfire, where I share personal stories of the supernatural, and also the Paranormal Podcast, where I interview experts like you.
Yeah, you guys, I've been on a show a few times, and I was also on your Plus show where you have.
Yes.
You tell them about that.
Well, something we don't do as much of that now, but we were doing for a while webinars for our Plus Club members, and you were fantastic
Thanks.
on that. Really great. And the thing that we do with the Plus Club is people who really love the shows, they can get access to our back catalog because there's always free podcasts that we put out.
Yeah.
You never have to pay for anything if you don't want to. If you want to listen to the current shows, those are absolutely free. However, for the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire, but if you want to go back and get the archives going back to 2005, we have a Plus Club. Plus, we do a ton of bonus content. We have a show called Ghost Insight, which is only for our Plus members. UFO Encounters, just for our Plus Club members. The Other Side, which gets into the spiritual side of things for our Plus Club members. So we like to offer something for everybody. You don't have to pay a dime to listen to our free podcasts. And then if you're a super fan and you're really enjoying it, you can support us by being a part of our Plus Club. But I always direct new people to the free stuff. Try the free stuff and see because there's plenty of it there, new episodes every week.
Well, and you also broadcast on, is it Facebook Live?
I do a YouTube Live every week, which also is but it's also rebroadcast on Facebook. We try to get people to YouTube because that really is the best place for video. But I dabbled the last couple of years in some live streaming, and it was always well received. So we've started a weekly live stream. You're going to be a guest on it, Jim Harold Live, every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it because we're able to bring comments up on the screen, kind of interact with our audience. When we have a guest like you, we can bring questions up, and it's kind of a nice thing. We do some paranormal news, a campfire story. So that's at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jim Harold.
Yeah, and you guys, the link will be below to everything we're talking about today, because I really want you to go over and check out his podcast, especially on YouTube. He does a great job. Listen to his voice. It's made for radio, you guys, right?
I have a voice made for radio and a face made for radio, too.
I love that joke. I love that. Okay, so you've been on Coast to Coast a lot. I mean,
yes.
Quite a few times.
Yes.
It's very impressive. I'm going to say at least 10 or 12 times, if not more.
Yeah, that's probably right. They're always very nice. I was just on with Richard in December. We talked about some kind of Yuletide Christmas stories, and that was a lot of fun. But they were always usually pretty generous, and I'm usually on there once or twice a year and have been for the last several years. So they've been very kind to me, and I always enjoy that because there's that live aspect to it. There's also the fact that you're talking to people who may not be familiar with podcasts. And that's the beauty of radio. You can reach a broader audience, maybe somebody who has no idea how to listen to a podcast, but maybe it introduces them to it. And if not, at least they get some of the stories. They get to hear some of the stories. So that's always a lot of fun to do traditional radio, which is actually my background. That's where I came from. Working on the business side, I was frustrated because I'm like, I think I could do this if I just had somewhere to talk into a mic. You know, at that point, wife and kids, I can't just up and quit my job. You know, in 2005. So I said, I'll try this podcasting thing. It looks like a fun little hobby. And I had no idea whatsoever it would turn into my full-time job.
Absolutely stunning. I remember when you made that switch, when you jumped off and did it full time. I mean, because I remember 2005, that's the infancy of podcasting. And then to be able to take that just a few years, 7 years later, I think it was.
Yeah,
12.
2012. Yeah.
Yeah, to jump into full time. This is his gig. That's crazy cool. So you guys, if you're out there wanting to learn to podcast, seriously, start listening to his shows. I know you had a class in the very beginning. One of our good friends, Patrick Keller, studied with you. You guys, Patrick Keller was on this show with me.
Yes, Patrick's great.
Patrick's
does a
great
job.
You've really taught him well. He has that style like you do too. It's just great.
Cool, cool. I'm glad, you know, that's a nice thing. And I think the reason I quit doing the classes was, one, it was really hard to keep that up and do this full time as well. And the other thing was, not enough people were like Patrick. They would take the class and then they never do anything. And it was like, you know, and then Patrick is like my star student, you know?
Yeah.
He really
is a
took
star.
the ran with it. Yeah. Yeah. He does a great job.
He does. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Ouija Board. You guys know I love talking Ouija Board here.
Yeah.
So what do you, first of all, I know you have one to show us, but what is your overall opinion or belief about Ouija boards?
Well, I'm going to tell you my unvarnished belief. We've talked about this before. I think it might disagree with yours, but I just want to throw it out there, just being 100% transparent.
Yes.
First of all, I think you are great and you do a great job. And I would trust you running a Ouija board next to me. You know, I wouldn't be worried about it at all because you know what you're doing. I kind of look at it as, I worry sometimes it's like a spiritual chainsaw, and I'll explain what I mean. Okay. I'm sure you've seen these men and women who will take a chainsaw and they will make a beautiful sculpture, maybe out of wood, maybe out of ice. You've seen that, the guys with and the ladies with the ice sculptures, you know, and in their hands, a chainsaw is a great tool. I put a chainsaw in my hand and I'm just as apt to cut my hand off.
True. Me too.
So sometimes I worry about the Ouija board, that people like yourself who really know what they're doing. Very cool tool, cool device. I do worry a little bit about people who don't know what they're doing and what they might bring in because they don't know what they're doing. Thus the analogy of the
and that makes sense. And the channel here, as you guys all know, is all about how to use the Ouija board in great ways to get inspiring and, you know, great messages that'll help you in your life. So show us what you got there. What box is that? Let's see the picture.
This has got a date from the 70s. You'll probably know the exact
I know
date. This was my wife's.
Look at that.
It is my wife's. And let's see, is it in frame? Yeah, it's in frame.
Yes, it is. What year did she get this, would you say?
Gosh. Maybe it says here 1972, but she didn't get it in 72. She got it later.
Okay.
I would say late 70s, early 80s.
Well, that style and that box lasted for a while. So that one is circa 72. Let's see the board inside of it now.
Yeah,
I love that box because of the hands on it. That's the same box, you guys, that I had with my original board that I've shown you many times before. That's exactly.
And I got to say, I mean, I love retro stuff. So to me, I like it so much better than what you see now. I mean, with the store-bought ones, you know.
Hands down. That's a Masonite board. Let's see it. Let's see what good shape it's in, you guys.
It's in really good shape.
Oh, heck yeah, it is. That's my board. That is the one.
Yeah.
Okay, so because the corners are a little square, it does look to me like it would be late 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know, but I take your word for it. And
Well,
here I can.
Do you have the planchette? Can we see the indicator?
Yes.
because
It's
that's
really
always a
interesting.
giveaway, you guys. I can tell from the
That's
indicator.
really interesting. I mean, to have this level of knowledge about this. This is the planchette. I
Okay,
don't know.
see the plastic in there, you guys? The little plastic, I call it the Ouija eye. The plastic in there,
Mm-hmm.
that tells me it's a little later. That'd be late 70s, early 80s because of that
Okay.
little, yep, which is perfect. Now mine had the brass tab, you guys. Remember I told you about that? It would fall out. So they changed that because it was a little dangerous for kids, right? You could swallow that, step
Ah.
on it, lose it.
So
But
this would have been just a little bit later than yours.
yeah, correct. So that's a great board and it's wonderful shape. It makes me wonder, do you guys ever use it?
Well, I'm just trying to put it back so I don't ruin it.
Exactly. Don't want you to ruin it for your
I
wife.
just, yeah, it's a little musty, but
You
I
guys,
mean,
it was
not
in
our
his
basement.
basement. I made him go down his basement.
Not our basement now is not musty, but it was in a musty basement. So we tried, it's not too bad, but you can get a little bit of that. Just adds to kind of the overall atmosphere of it. We don't use it. I think we used it once, probably about over 20 years ago.
Oh,
And since we've been married with some friends, I think we did once. I think we're both a little leery of it, but you notice we don't get rid of it.
no, you notice that you keep it
I
in
mean,
your,
if we were that dead set against it, and in fact, hold on a second.
yes, everybody always keeps these boards like in their basement, the attic, the closet.
I've even got this on the background of my set, this little guy.
Oh, that's a new little guy that just came out.
Funko, whatever you call it.
Yeah, right. Cute. You
So
guys
I'm
can
not,
still get that. It's a collector's item.
yeah, I'm not so like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not so against them or anything. It's just I'm very cautious of them, but not so much that I would get rid of this. I think my wife got me this for my set here. I always have kind of a bunch of tchotchkes in the back, and I kind of move them around. Like I don't think you could see that before, but every few weeks I'll move things around to keep it interesting.
Yeah, I look in the background, you guys. I love his little jellyfish. That's like my favorite back there. And the telephone.
Thank you. And that's real. The phone is not a replica. I mean, the only thing that there is like a replica is probably the radio right behind my ear. That's a replica, but the radio that's up in the corner there is real and it's old, and the phone is real and it's old. I mean, and those masks were made by one of my listeners over in the UK.
Oh, wow.
And they're fantastic. The Frankenstein and the alien mask.
Oh my God. I love both of those. Speaking of aliens, we like talking about all kinds of spooky, interesting, the bizarro kind of stories on here, as well as spiritual and metaphysical stuff too. But I have an interest in extraterrestrials. Do you have any good ET story to tell us?
Well, we have had some over the years. It's not as much the thrust of the shows, but we've had stories over the years about UFOs. I'm trying to think of one that really stands out. I will tell you one that stands out actually for me because it's a family story.
Oh, I love it.
And I think this and one other family story, which was a ghost story, kind of set me off in the direction of doing these shows as a little kid, because I've heard these stories ever since I was a little kid. They never changed. Now you have to understand a little bit about my parents. Working class folks, not prone to sleeping with pyramids under their bed, not paranormal people, as it were. And you got to remember the time frame we're talking. When I first heard these stories, the mid 70s. So a lot of the stuff that is around now was not common knowledge back then. There weren't ghost hunting shows. There weren't a lot of UFO shows. You might get lucky with In Search Of, which was one of my favorites.
But that was until like the 80s.
Yeah, in the very late 70s and 80s, yeah. So anyway, my dad and mom, when I was a baby, and I might as well tell my age, it was probably, I'm guessing this happened around 1970.
He's still a baby compared to me.
No, you look great. I look like I've been through the war. But anyway, the point being, they dropped me off. My family, my parents' families were originally from West Virginia. I was born and raised in Ohio my whole life, in the Cleveland area. So anyway, they were visiting my grandparents and they dropped me off with my grandma, and my mom and dad went out to this secluded area. Now, you know, what is when you think about your mom and dad, it's like you don't want to know why they
No.
were doing what they were doing. So I don't want to know. I
Oh,
could guess,
wow.
but I don't want to know. Anyway, so they went off to this secluded like area that was totally deserted. And if anybody knows about rural areas, when you get out far, there's no lights or anything. It is dark, absolutely pitch black dark. So anyway, and this is the best UFO story I think I've ever heard. And it is a family one in terms of ones not like Roswell, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they pull into this place and they're talking or whatever. And then they both said that this huge light in the sky lit up the whole sky. And you got to remember, it was totally dark. And he said it was light enough that you could read the speedometer,
Oh,
like an
wow.
old school clock that they used to have in cars with hands on them. They could read that just like it was total daylight. And I think it lasted 30 or 60 seconds.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then my mom agreed with that. The next thing only my dad saw. My dad said he looked out of his car door and he said there was a man with a welding mask with his hand up.
What?
At that point, they decided to leave. That's what he described it as, a welding mask. And then they're going down the road, flying down the road, trying to get away from whatever's going on there. And my mom says in her Appalachian accent, then there were about the biggest bunch of birds I ever seen in my life over on the bank. And then they got home. And the thing is that they fully expected to see this on the news or in the newspaper or whatever. Nothing. Never reported, nothing.
Wow.
And, that story never changed. Now, my mom's been gone for almost 10 years now. My dad's still with us. He's 87 years old. Tells exactly the same story. Not a jot or a tittle has changed. It's the same story. And again, my mom, my dad might joke about something, although he would eventually tell the truth. My mom wouldn't even joke about something like that.
I'm surprised they even told you the story. Like that's kind of scary.
It was scary. And I don't know, maybe hearing that and the other family ghost story, which I can tell you a little bit, set me off on this path. Maybe because then as a kid, I mentioned I got into In Search of, started reading books. Remember that old Time Life series that you used to see on TV, with the quote fortune teller, and it's like the mysteries of the universe. And I always never got it. I checked it out of the library, but never actually got it. And I saw that recently at a Half Price Books, and I almost bought it. I'm like, but it's like, what am I going to do with it? But
Put
anyway,
it behind you.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Maybe I should revisit that.
I think you
should. As the case may be, I think that set me off now for a life of, even if it were just for my own interest, exploring these mysteries. Now, here's another weird thing. Over the years, I've done interviews with people about UFOs, experts and things, and they talk about something called screen memories. Are you familiar with screen memories?
Scream or screen?
Screen memories.
No, I don't think I've heard that term.
It's like people who have seen a UFO and then they'll report seeing something like an owl.
Oh,
the thought
I've heard about the owl stories. Yes, I have.
So the thought is that the owl in the owl stories is put in place of maybe an alien.
A screen. A
screen memory.
I get it
and
now.
I'm wondering, and I talked to Mike Cleland, who has done a couple of books on this subject, called The Messengers. It was The Messengers, and then there was a sequel to it. That I asked him, I told him my parents' story. He said, could that have been a screen memory? He said, absolutely. Absolutely, it could have been. So just really, really an odd thing. So, I mean, I've always had a fascination with the UFOs. I believe there's something to it. Now, I do believe that there's hoaxes. I believe that's part of it. I believe part of it is military stuff. I think that the U.S. military and other militaries have things that we can't comprehend that are really wild. I'm sure that they do. Then I think something are good people just mistaken. That's part of it. But then there's the other little piece that's inexplicable and doesn't fall into any of those categories. And that's where I wonder where the truth of these UFOs, where they come from. And I tend to be one who believes that we are being visited from
Oh,
other planets and so forth. I do tend to believe that. Is that the majority of the cases? I don't know. But, when the skeptics say, well, the distances are too vast, scientifically, it's not possible. It's not possible with our science.
right.
But how do we know what what their science is? I mean, if you show an iPhone to a caveman, he's going to think it's some kind of weird magic. It's
Right.
impossible, right? It is in his frame of reference. So I think it's possible that these are coming from other planets. Or if you look at science and the multi-worlds theory and the multiverse, are they coming from other worlds or other dimensions? Are
Mhm.
they us? Are they time travelers? I mean, I think that the truth is very weird. I think existence in general is very weird and much deeper than we just take at face value every day. That's one thing people say, what did you learn over the years with these shows? And it's not that I have one particular answer. I have more questions ever, but the one thing I will say is I think our existence is far more multifaceted and just plain weird than
Mhm.
we understand when we're going through our everyday life, paying the mortgage, picking the kids up at school, and paying for the groceries.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things out there just in our own physical realm without even having to go up to lights in the sky. But I do got a question for you, and I'm sure you asked your father this because he knows what you do now. He knows what you've been doing for the
Yeah.
last quite a few years. I can't do the math. How many years was that you've been doing this?
Almost 18, which
Almost
blows my
18
mind.
years.
Yeah.
Holy moly, you're right, 18 years, 2005, 18 to 2023. So did he ever say, "Well, gosh, that's what that looked like." He sees, like, the little gray alien behind you or, TV shows as you go, "That's what the guy in the mask looked like?" Has he ever made any connections like that, or he just leaves it as a man with a welding mask?
He leaves it as a man with a welding mask. And it kind of makes sense because if it were some kind of being with some kind of mask on,
Mm,
he could have been explaining it in terms he understood. He was a
yeah.
steel worker. So that would be something he could relate to. So if it was some kind of spacesuit or something, or was it part of a screen memory the same way? Maybe it was an alien standing there, but they presented himself to him as a man in a welding mask. Who
Yeah.
knows? Who
Well,
knows?
he would understand what that is and know it, like you said, with the screen memories. I love that. So you got to think about this now. When the conquistadores came down to South America or Mexico and they started conquering them, when they first saw the ships in the distance, they didn't know what that was. And when they
Right,
saw these men on horses, it was like a half man,
right.
half animal, right? So it's a frame of reference. So the owl thing I've heard before too, because and I see a lot of owls, Jim. Just saying, I see a lot of great horned owls. So who knows? Maybe that was a screen memory, but owls. I mean, yeah, that's a common thing people see. Like I'm out walking in the woods by myself or something, or I'm at night and a big owl appears. That made me think of your mom too. And you said she saw all these birds, large birds. Maybe that was like that owl thing too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah. So again, I think that with the combination of a little touch of Leonard Nimoy and some
Yeah.
books, particularly I was fascinated by the Bermuda Triangle, which was,
I was too.
oh, I was just like, what's going on there? And the weird thing
Yes.
is, this is kind of freaking me out now. We're getting close to it. I'm going to be going on a paranormal cruise. And that's
Oh,
going to be in March. It's more of a UFO kind of ancient mysteries cruise. We're going to have a
okay.
lot of UFO people there, and I'm one of the well, I think I'm more of a moderator to some of the panels and things.
Yes.
So it's a great opportunity, and I really enjoy it. We did one a few years ago, which was fantastic with the late great Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Mhm.
And the thing is that I had a point about this. What was the point? What was the question?
Well, we were talking about how you got into this and how this influenced you.
Yeah, but there was a point to this. There was something. Oh, yes, the Bermuda Triangle. Yes, I remember
Bermuda
now.
Triangle.
So we're going to be doing the one night a cruise through the Bermuda Triangle. Like you get on this other boat and they'll take you on a tour of the Bermuda Triangle area. And I'm like, Ooh, it's getting close. I'm getting a little freaked out.
Full circle coming back. So what do you, so yeah, I was so into that. And in the 70s, that was a big deal, talking about the Bermuda Triangle.
Yep.
We had books in my library on base. I lived on base, but in our little library on our
Charles Berlitz was the guy who wrote all the
okay. And I was
books.
so into reading all that stuff. So what do you think about after all the times? I mean, you've interviewed people, you've read stuff. What do you think about it? It's been your interest.
The funny thing is I ought to interview the first grade version of me because I knew a lot more about it then than I do now. And the funny thing is, over the years, I've looked for books and things on it, and there seems to be a lot less these days.
I agree.
I've done a couple. I've interviewed Bruce Gernon, who said he flew through a kind of an electronic fog, and a couple of other people, but not as many as in the past. But I'll tell you, the one case that really fascinates me is Flight 19, I think it was. It was in the 1940s. It was after the Second World War. I believe it's Flight 19 off the top of my head. And it was a squadron of trainees.
Oh.
And they all got lost in the Bermuda Triangle. And they talked about some of the radio transmissions. They sounded confused. They sounded disoriented. And then they sounded like nothing. And
did they ever show up again, or did they go disappear?
No, gone forever.
Oh, I don't know.
And I don't even think they found any wreckage. And so adult Jim thinks, oh, well, most of these things, bad weather, whatever stuff that happens to boats at sea. But it's similar to my general thought on the paranormal, is that I think a lot of times we think something's paranormal and we may be calling it paranormal. It may be totally normally explicable, right? But I think there's a percentage that really are tapping into the paranormal. I totally believe that. And that's kind of what I believe about the Bermuda Triangle. There's probably a good number of those wrecks and things over the years that if you could go back and see what really happened, that there could be quote logical explanations, but I believe there's some that are not. Like that Flight 19 doesn't sound very logical to me. It's not like something weird is going on. You add that to the idea of USOs.
Oh yeah,
which are underwater objects, right?
Yeah, submerged.
Not UFOs, but USOs that are submerged. And you wonder, could the Bermuda Triangle be a base?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right.
Who knows? But I do think, and they say that we know less about the deep oceans than we know about deep space. So I wonder sometimes if that might be something that's going on, and it ties into the UFO piece as well.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's always captivated me too. And the whole idea of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, that also captured me. These old build race civilizations or beyond that we can find, historical remains of it. Well, I think they do. Maybe it's Bermuda, maybe it's somewhere else, maybe it's off the coast of Japan. They have all these theories about it. But these old, they find these submerged buildings and stuff, which is, I've always been fascinated with that too. Like, is that just part of our Earth that got covered up and with water because, all the water levels changed? Or was it actually part of something that was underground, like you said, a base or something for off-worldly travelers? I mean, I don't know, but I find that very fascinating too.
And I do think that ancient peoples probably had some kind of lost knowledge that we don't have. Because if you look at things like Stonehenge, which I actually got to visit in 2019, which was awesome.
Nice.
And you see some of these things like what's going on in Turkey, a Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, that's just freaking amazing.
Stones that are engineered and would have had to been, cut with like a specialized blade that we would have now. But they did it, and they didn't have those blades. It makes you wonder. And I don't want to ever say that these peoples weren't ingenious. I think they were smarter in some ways than we are. Because I think sometimes we tend to think, oh, we've got our iPhones, we've got our electronics. We're so much smarter than these people. And I actually disagree. I think they did a lot with a lot less. But I do think there's a possibility that they had some knowledge that we don't have. For example, did they somehow, and this sounds out there, but maybe did they levitate the stones that built the pyramids or Stonehenge or whatever it might be? I think there's a piece of the puzzle we don't understand. And I think sometimes as humans and modern people in this century, we think we got it all figured out. But I think we still need to be humble enough to realize we don't understand everything. And science is great. Look, we are doing something now, and when I say this to younger person, they don't know what I'm talking about. But when I'm talking to somebody like you in the prime of life, like me, you understand. This used to be Ted Koppel and Nightline. You used to need a satellite to do what we're doing right now, and we can do it all from our own houses.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's amazing. So I am a huge respecter of science. But I also believe that science doesn't have all the answers all the time. And I think we have to be humble enough as human beings to understand we're doing great things. The technology is great. You look at healthcare, what they can do for people now as opposed to 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago is amazing. Should be applauded. But we shouldn't be so conceited that we think we have it all figured out and that there can't be something out there that we don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology isn't just in our cell phones or our computer chips. Technology is ourselves and our own ability for such as telepathy or telekinesis, as you said, moving objects. I mean, we don't know. I mean, but there's stories of this, and they talk about it in the ancient cultures, antiquities, kind of their books and stories. They talk about this stuff, and we know about historically about Atlantis because of Plato and his stories and what he told us about that lost continent. So there's some technology there that's beyond or outside of what we think technology is. That's why I always like to say, let's stay open to the biggest piece of technology we have is ourselves. And I know when I channel, when I do the Ouija board work, or when I do any kind of readings that I do, I'm using that technology. So I like to call it technology because it's something that I think all the older cultures knew, the shamans or the journeymen or the healers or the curanderos or the brujas. They understood how to use this and to help the culture and their people. And I have to think back. I love the Mayan culture, you guys. I love all the South American stuff, and I love those pyramids there. Probably my favorite of all. But you got to look at what they were doing with astronomy, I should say. Astronomy, and how they had these perfect alignments, like Stonehenge you talked about with the equinoxes. Just amazing stuff. And we can date sometimes these structures when they were built because of where they were aligned, and that star or those planets, how they're aligned with it, are only aligned at a certain time every so many thousands of years. So this is when you get into some really high level technology that they had, or knowledge they had, that I guess, we may not even understand to this day.
Agreed.
Yeah. So there's so many places you can go with that. I love talking about this. I had Freddie Silva on the show last
I've interviewed him.
Yeah, he's wonderful, isn't he? And he was talking about not so much the technology, but he was talking about technology, but more about how it related to the Knights Templar and some of their ritualistic rebirth ceremonies they had, which is the type of technology too, to be reborn again. I mean, we can go so deep into this, but I got to ask you, okay, so when I have Jim on the show, I got to ask him about a true ghost story. I need a good ghost story, and I know my audience does too.
Okay, a ghost story, because I'm trying to think of one of my favorite ghost stories.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I mean, he has a lot. He hears a lot. He interviews a lot of people.
Yeah.
They all come forward with their ghost stories. And you have, was it 5 books on this campfire series with ghosts?
Yes. They're kind of some of the best stories we've had. It's been a few years since we did one, but yeah, we've got a whole series of them. I'll show you a quick one.
Those are really cool, and I'll put the links below to them. But there's 5 books he does called the Campfire Series, True Ghost Stories. There they are.
Yeah, this is, that's the first one. And, it's one of those things with, here's a good one. Okay. That's one of my favorite ghost stories. No, the problem is, Karen, when you've done, we're up to almost 600 episodes on Campfire.
You guys, that's crazy.
And that's just Campfire. But we've done, these days, that's about 10 stories a show. Now, it wasn't always that many, but we're talking about thousands of stories. So sometimes the index doesn't work that fast. You're like, oh What's a good one?
I
What's a
know,
good one?
because I have so many ghost stories, and I was on a show sharing one of my ghost stories one year. And it's in my book, The Spirits of Ouija, about Teresa and Sturmy in Mexico. And that was a story that happened. And that down in Mexico, and it came back to my house up in when I was living in California. But yeah, you have so many stories. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's hear one.
I do have one now. Thank goodness I looked at that book, because it's like, oh, there's a great one.
It triggers you. Yeah.
This probably goes back 10 years on the show. It was actually a gentleman named Dave from the UK.
Okay.
And she told this story about his significance. I think it was his mother-in-law. And she, had a lot of health issues and would go into the national health over there, the NHS, their hospitals over there. And she'd periodically have to go for different things. And this one night she was in the hospital for something. I didn't get the sense it was terrible or super major, but she was there. And this woman walks in, a nurse, but she's in like an old-time nurse's suit, uniform, like with the cap and the whole thing. Like you wouldn't see it, probably past 1975.
Yeah, the nurses don't wear caps anymore.
Yeah. And this might have even looked like it was from like the 40s or something, even older. So the woman comes in and said, "Would you like some tea?" And Dave's mother-in-law says yes. So she goes away for what seems like forever. And she comes back about an hour later, and she has the tea and gives her the tea. And Dave's mother-in-law says, "Hey, what's with the old nurse getup over here?" And she just smiles and walks away.
Wow.
So
okay.
anyway, she's thinking about it and can't figure it out. So she goes home. Now Dave's mother-in-law liked to see psychics. So she saw this psychic and said, "You've recently seen a ghost." And she said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, her name is Lily."
Oh.
And she didn't put two together and couldn't figure out what it was. So anyway, one day she's at the hospital again, and there's this old picture of like the staff or something. And she's looking at it, and it's like dating from the 40s, and there's a picture of a woman in there, and it's the nurse.
Oh.
And she asks one of the staff members, and she tells her what happened. She said, "Oh, yes, that's the resident ghost. You met Lily."
Oh, they knew about it.
And Dave said she should have asked for at least a latte or something if she was gonna
Okay, my question is this: when she brought the did she actually bring the cup of tea to her?
Yeah.
Drank?
Yeah.
So she drank ghost tea?
Yeah, she drank ghost tea.
So the cup was still sitting there?
Well, no, I mean, just like anybody, somebody would bring you like a cup of tea and give it to you. Yeah.
But then she took it back, or she didn't put it on her table next to her?
I'm assuming she put it on the table next to her. So the tea with the cup was real. The tea was real.
Oh my gosh. That's almost like an apport if it came from the ghost. I mean, it came from another dimension.
Well, maybe it was modern tea, but she brought it. I don't know the answer to that.
See, you guys, this is where my mind goes. It's like, was this an apport? Was this a ghost tea? Was this, was the cup still there?
It reminds me of something I'm going to grab off of my shelf. It'll just take me a minute if I don't
sure.
get...
See, now I would have kept that cup, but then you don't know that's a ghost. But that's pretty odd. Somebody with this outfit, unless you're going, are you doing dress up? Is this dress up day at the hospital? 1940s day? That's so wild. I love stories like that.
This reminds me of a book that came out, I think, let's see, when was this from? Late 70s, early 80s. Let's see here. And it's actually, I've got a copy signed, 1976.
Okay.
The Ghost of Flight 401. Have you heard of this?
I know John Fuller. I mean, I know his work.
Yeah.
And he used the Ouija board, by the way, to interview the ghost to get his story. Did you know that, Jim?
I did not know that, or
yes,
I did not remember it. I may have forgotten. I may have known.
That's an interesting part of the story. That's why I love John Fuller. That's a great story, by the way.
Well, that reminds me, of that story. The Ghost of Flight 401 was about this flight 401 that crashed, I think in the Florida Everglades, and some
It
people
was Florida
survived.
Everglades, yes.
Yeah, some people survived, some people did not, including the crew, or at least some of the crew. And then Eastern Airlines, which has been defunct, I think I just heard that it's been 30 years since they've been defunct or
Sounds
something.
about right.
Which we grew up with, or Eastern Airlines was one of the big airlines. They had, and I can't believe they do this. I don't know if they still do this. It sounds terrible. But they took some parts of that plane that crashed with the dead people on it, and they put it on other planes.
Yes.
As replacement parts.
Right.
And then people would report seeing the ghosts of the dead crew members on those planes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I do believe in the idea of haunted objects. I totally believe that's a thing. You know, it's interesting, and I still do from time to time. I used to love to go to thrift stores and buy like old stuff. As you can tell just from our little discussion here, I love retro stuff.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's just something about it. But I do wonder sometimes, it's like, what are you bringing home with you?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole concept of psychometry. When you take somebody's, like, for example, the ring, and you hold it and you're reading it and you're saying, okay, I'm getting these images, and you could be right, because it's like there's some kind of residue, energetic residue in a sense. But
yeah, we had
I was gonna say, this plane thing was full on apparitions people would see.
Yeah.
And they believe it because
they'd be like the captain sitting there in a seat or something, the dead captain or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of a story we had, not exactly, but about the haunted objects thing. There was this young woman who had like this flamenco dancer lamp. It was made in the shape of a flamenco dancer and a woman, and it was next to her bed. And she was like 12, 13 years old or something. And she started seeing every night a vision of this flamenco dancer, like at the foot of her bed.
Oh, like an apparition.
And it kept, in fact, I have it here. I think we were talking earlier. We have a coloring book.
Oh, you guys. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Kim created a coloring book. Okay, you got to show this. This is
I want to show you the illustration of the. So basically, she had this. Here it is. Here's an illustration of it. I don't know how much of that you can see.
Oh yeah, she's all.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and you see the little girl.
Oh,
there,
the girl in the corner is scared.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was, every night she would start seeing this flamenco dancer. One time, the flamenco dancer made it sound like it was her mom. It sounded like her mom's footfalls. But when she came in, it was the flamenco dancer, like looking around the corner. And every night she would get progressively closer and closer to like the foot of her bed, till when she was, like you saw in the picture, like over the thing. So they kind of, she told her parents about it, and she connected it in her mind to that lamp. So they said, we'll get rid of it. So they, quote, got rid of it. She kept seeing it. She kept seeing it.
The lamp's gone now.
Yeah, lamp's gone. She keeps seeing it. Turns out they didn't really get rid of it. They threw it like outside behind an outbuilding of some type. So it's still on the premises. It's still on the property. And she told me it keeps happening, keeps happening. They finally totally got rid of it. Turns out, the caller says at least, that it had been made in a women's prison or something. And that the person who made it, I don't know how she found any of this out, but apparently the person who made it had some kind of history with kids and it wasn't good.
Oh.
So maybe the energy of that person was imbued in that lamp, and it was showing itself through that apparition or whatever it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sure makes you think, right? It sure makes you think.
Yeah.
And we don't have it figured out. We really don't know how all this works, right? So I'm always open to all kinds of ideas and concepts for those reasons. We just don't know. And as we explore more and more and more, we start realizing more of connecting the dots too.
Yep.
I think it's fascinating. And so my theory, I'd flip that around and say, did the flamenco dancer appear because one, it could have been like some past life thing, or two, could have been somebody in the family. Three, the child was so open that spirits could come. Or four, was a great active imagination, which, that's a fantastic tool to use. So you don't know, we don't know.
No, it's
But it
true.
makes for a good story.
Yeah, it does. And the other thing it is, that's kind of a microcosm of all this stuff. I don't understand it. And it's tough when people say, well, Jim, my house is haunted. What should I do? Or it's like, I don't know. Talk to people like Karen, they might have better ideas.
But we all have a piece of the puzzle,
No.
and you've interviewed a lot of people, so you probably have some suggestions, or maybe somebody to talk to. But
Yeah.
listen, we got to talk about your coloring book. You guys, it's super cute. Would you show that whole thing to us, please?
Yes. And honestly, let me see here. I've got, I don't have my window up here where I can see it. Okay. This is the True Ghost Story adult coloring book.
Look at that.
It was illustrated by a great illustrator, Len Peralta. And this came out several years ago, and I really don't promote it enough. There's 25 images in here.
Show us some. Show us maybe a couple more. You showed us the flamenco.
Yeah, I was going to show you. This one actually was about somebody that played with a Ouija board and had like a weird thing come in their lava lamp. Let's see if we can get this.
Oh, yes, no on there. So
yeah, Lucifer in the Lamp was the story. And
okay, so you gave this gentleman your stories, and he created images to match the stories.
Yes,
basically.
Yes.
Neat.
Fantastic job. Let's see.
Now, it's an adult coloring book, obviously, but I guess kids could use it too.
Yeah, if they're not too freaked out. Yeah, I think I'd be a little older kids. You might not.
Now, do you color in it with your children or with your wife or anything like that?
Yeah, a bunch of us colored, but I'm not a good. I'm very poor colorer, but my kids colored it. Here's one about a haunted chair. We talked about haunted objects.
Look at that.
And this is one about a haunted chair.
Cute, super cute. Listen, I love things like that. I call it cute.
Oh, and this one, I don't even remember this. Oh, this was one about the ghost nanny. This was the ghost nanny.
Oh, that's creepy.
Was a good one. Yeah.
That's a creepy look.
So yeah, we have 25 stories in there, and Len just did a fantastic job. And just Google him, Len Peralta. He does such great illustration work and so forth. And this is one of those things I don't think we sold 1 million copies of it or anything, but I'm very proud of it.
And where can people find that if they're interested? Is that on Amazon?
Yeah, okay. They can go to Amazon.com and just look at Jim Harold Coloring Book, or they can go to JimHaroldBooks.com. That'll take them to a page where they can find all the links for
you guys, I'll put links
books
below.
in this. Yeah,
I love seeing the stories to put into images. And you guys, I got to tell you, my cat Jack wrote a book, and you guys heard me talk about this a little bit, but it's a picture book, and I have an illustrator doing the images to it. That's all I'm going to say right now. As I get closer, I'll start releasing some of the images, but it's an adorable story. And Jim, Jack was one of my cats, who actually transitioned in 2019, a couple weeks after Rosemary had transitioned. And he was lovely, lovely cat, but he started talking to me on the board. As you know, I do animal communication. He started telling me the story, and he wanted to write it. He goes, I want to be an author like you. And so he told me the story to me through the board. And then when he transitioned, he finished the story. It's you guys, it's super cute. I can't wait till I can share it with everybody here.
Oh, that is so neat. That is neat.
It is,
and that's a great way to remember him as well.
Exactly, and his story is definitely made for children. It's not scary story or anything like that, but it's just the sweetest. And I'm like, where did you get this from? You guys know when I channel with Rodney or my board partners, and I get these interesting stories and messages, I'm like, where does this come from? Well, I consider it coming from the guides or different guest speakers. We have guest speakers that come to the board sometimes, and Jack was one of them for us. Right now, speaking of guest speakers, my cat's over there. He just knocked a Ouija board off of a chair. That's that sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it. He's looking at it. He's like, it's Bear. You guys know Bear. He shows up on the show. He's looking at like, did I just do something wrong? It's okay, Bear. It's just a Ouija board. No big deal.
Speaking of Ouija boards, I have to ask you a question. What is the background of that one board behind you, Ouija Queen? Because
Do you
it's got a
like
very
that?
retro look. I love that. What is the deal with that one?
Well, that one's from the 40s. There was a whole series of these Ouija Queen, and there's several different images you can get with this one. This is just one of them. And I love it because first of all, I love the 40 board. This is another board from the 40s too. And so is that Mystic Tray and this one. And back then in the 40s, they had all these different themes. Like a lot of it was the themes were exotic, such as these fortune teller boards, or from the Middle East, there's Far East. And then you had the themes of here's Au Revoir, doing a little French in there. But yeah, this is just a really cool board. It's a particle board. And I got it and added it to my collection. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe it's been 6-7 years. I can't remember exactly when it came in, but it's a cool little board. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat.
Yeah. And
You
this board I
always
got to
have
show you
such neat
too.
ones.
This is fun. I rescue boards. Look at how cut up this board is. See, somebody use it as a cutting board, you guys. Coasters. I mean, each board has a story to tell, and that's why I like my boards.
Now, do you believe, and I don't mean to flip this, but do you believe that like the boards carry the spirits of people who owned them in the past?
I don't necessarily believe that, like that's like the spirits inside of it. What I do believe is that if there's an affinity towards something, like we were talking about objects earlier, like psychometry, or there's something there that you can contact sometimes those energies if they choose to be contacted. But I don't think just because I brought the board in my house, it's there. I do have some stories where I had an old board. It is, I don't know, I have shelving system of boards, Jim. It goes everywhere. Where is that? Oh, it's way up there. So it's way up there, up high. I brought it into my home, and I remember going to sleep. I put it in the hallway, and I remember I woke up to these apparitions filing into my room, and I thought, well, what's new in my house? It was this board, and I thought, okay, well, maybe there's some energies that just wanted me to communicate with them. And I told them, I said, when I sit down the board, I'll talk to you. And some of them did start coming through. So, that happens. And now, is it because I'm like a magnet? Because it's like, 1-900 call Karen, because I do the board so much? Or is it because they actually were attached or along with that board? I don't have the answer to that. But I'm open to the bizarre. I'm open to unusual things happening, because I have. Like you were mentioning earlier, so many things seem paranormal outside of normal, but they become actually part of our own normality as we start opening up to these kinds of ideas and concepts of the metaphysical, paranormal, supernatural.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah. So Jim, tell us what else is coming up for you this year, and one more time where people can find information about you and maybe even join you, on your different shows and channels to listen to what you got going on.
Well, the central place for everything is jimharold.com, the JIMHAROLD.com. You can find everything there. I would direct people probably number one, Jim Harold's Campfire. That's where real people call in with their spooky stories, some of the stories we talked about today. The Paranormal Podcast for interviews with great people like Karen about all matter of the paranormal. In terms of this year, we're expanding. We dabbled with some other shows last year, but this year we're really pushing on or 3 free podcasts that we're really getting behind. I'm restarting Jim Harold's Crime Scene, which I did 192 episodes of. It started before Serial, the podcast, and then I stopped. But it is a true crime show, so no paranormal on that one. Then I'm doing a show with my wife called You Won't Believe What Happened to Me, and that's about strange stories in the news and also listeners, non-paranormal stories of weird things that have happened to them. Then my daughter is continuing with a podcast she started. We've retooled that for 2023, and she's going to be telling spooky classic stories. We're just releasing one as I record this today, an H.P. Lovecraft story.
Oh, love his stuff.
Yeah, and she's I'm biased, but she's very talented with character voices and things. So she had her minor in drama in college, so she's on to her career in healthcare, but she likes to do it for fun on the side. And we continue with all our Plus programs and our weekly YouTube Live, which you're going to be on and that's on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jim Harold. Hope you join us for those. And so really going very fast this year, trying a lot of different things. Some of them will catch on, some of them won't, and we'll just reiterate and analyze. But we always want to bring people new stuff as long as they're receptive to it. And of course, the classics, which are really Campfire and the Paranormal Podcast. So very busy here at the Spooky Studio.
Well, and also you've got your thing, your cruise you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, that's coming up in late March. I think they're booked out for that.
Okay.
And probably will be at least at 1 or 2 paranormal events this year. I don't do a lot of paranormal events, but I probably will be doing a couple of this year. So stay tuned.
God, I wish you'd come to Michigan Paracon.
I would love to. You know, they put that on right when my kids have had to go to college the last few years. So it's right at that time, like that weekend. That's the one to be at. I would
the end
love
of August.
To be there.
Yeah, that's when school starts for less schools. That's a great one. I hope to see you there one of these years. I'll be there again this year. Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's the biggie. That's the one I keep saying, I really want to go to that. I really want to go to that.
Yeah, you really need to be there. You really need to be there. You really need to be there. 3 times is a charm.
Yep.
Well, I love to hear that the paranormal is the podcasting is all in your family. You guys are all so talented. It's great to have you on the show. And I'm so happy to call you one of my colleagues and friends. Thank you, Jim, so much for joining us here.
Thank you, Karen. Always a pleasure. And like I say on my shows, stay spooky.
That's great. All right, you guys, there you hear it. Stay spooky. This is Creative Visions TV. I'm Karen Dahlman. See you again real soon. Bye-bye.